Chapter 13, Part 2. It was a great funeral, such as befitted a noble warrior. As the evening drew near, the shouting and firing of guns, the beating of drums, and the brandishing and clanging of machetes increased. As Ziyudu had taken 3 titles in his life, it was a rare achievement. There were only 4 titles in the clan, and only 1 or 2 men in any generation ever achieved the 4th and highest. When they did, they became the lords of the land. Because he had taken titles, Iziyudu was to be buried after dark with only a glowing brand to light the sacred ceremony. But before this quiet and final rite, the tumult increased tenfold. Drums beat violently, and men leaped up and down in a frenzy. Guns were fired on all sides, and sparks flew out as the machete clanged together in warrior salutes. The air was full of dust and smell of gunpowder. It was then that the one-handed spirit came, carrying a basket full of water. People made way for him on all sides, and the noise subsided. Even the smell of gunpowder was swallowed in the sickly smell that now filled the air. He danced a few steps to the funeral drums and then went to see the corpse. "Ezeudu," he called in his guttural voice, "it has been poor. If you had been poor in your last life, I would have asked you to be rich when you come again. But you were rich. If you had been a coward, I would have asked you to bring courage. But you were a fearless warrior. If you had died young, I would have asked you to get life, but you lived long. So I asked you to come again, the way you came before. If your death was the death of nature, go in peace. But if a man caused it, do not allow him a moment's rest." He danced a few more steps and went away. The drums and the dancing began again and reached fever height. Darkness was around the corner, and the burial was near. Guns fired the last salute, and cannon rent the sky. And then from the center of the delirious fury came a cry of agony and shouts of horror. It was as if a spell had been cast. All was silent. In the center of the crowd, a boy lay in a pool of blood. It was the dead man's 16-year-old son, who with his brothers and half-brothers had been dancing the traditional farewell to their father. Okonkwo's gun had exploded, and a piece of iron had pierced the boy's heart. The confusion that followed was without parallel. In the tradition of Umuofia, violent deaths were frequent, but nothing like this had ever happened. The only course open to Okonkwo was to flee from the clan. It was a crime against the earth goddess to kill a clansman, and a man who committed it must flee from the land. The crime was of 2 kinds, male and female. Okonkwo had committed the female because it had been inadvertent. He could return to the clan after 7 years. That night he collected his most valuable belongings into headloads. His wives wept bitterly, and their children wept with them, without knowing why. Obierika and half a dozen other friends came to help and to console him. They each made 9 or 10 trips carrying Okonkwo's yams to store in Obierika's barn. And before the cock crowed, Okonkwo and his family were fleeing to his motherland. It was a little village called Mbanta, just beyond the borders of Mbaino. As soon as the day broke, a large crowd of men from Ezeudu's quarter stormed Okonkwo's compound, dressed in garbs of war. They set fire to his houses, demolished his red walls, killed his animals, and destroyed his barn. It was the justice of the earth goddess, and they were merely her messengers. They had no hatred in their hearts against Okonkwo. His greatest friend, Obierika, was among them. They were merely cleansing the land which Okonkwo had polluted with the blood of a clansman. Obierika was a man who thought about things. When the will of the goddess had been done, he sat down in his obi and mourned his friend's calamity. Why should a man suffer so grievously for an offense he had committed inadvertently? But although he thought for a long time, he found no answer. He was merely led into greater complexities. He remembered his wife's twin children, whom he had thrown away. What crime had they committed? The earth had decreed that they were an offense on the land and must be destroyed. And if the clan did not exact punishment for an offense against the great goddess, her wrath was loosed on all the land, and not just on the offender. As the elder said, if one finger brought oil, it soiled the others. Part 2, Chapter 14. Okonkwo was well received by his mother's kinsmen in Mbonta. The old man who received him was the mother's younger brother, who was now the eldest surviving member of that family. His name was Uchendu, and it was he who had received Okonkwo's mother 20 and 10 years before, when she had been brought home from Umuofia to be buried with her people. Okonkwo was only a boy then, and Uchendu still remembered him crying the traditional farewell, "Mother, mother, mother is going." That was many years ago. Today, Okonkwo was not bringing his mother home to be buried with her people. He was taking his family of 3 wives and their children to seek refuge in his motherland. As soon as Uchendu saw him with his sad and weary company, he guessed what had happened and asked no questions. It was not until the following day that Okonkwo told him the full story. The old man listened silently to the end and then said with some relief, "It is a female Ochu." And he arranged the requisite rites and sacrifices. Okonkwo was given a plot of ground on which to build his compound and 2 or 3 pieces of land on which to farm during the coming planting season. With the help of his mother's kinsmen, he built himself an obi and 3 huts for his wives. He then installed his personal god and the symbols of his departed fathers. Each of Uchendu's 5 sons contributed 300 seed yams to enable their cousin to plant a farm, for as soon as the first rain came, farming would begin. At last the rain came. It was sudden and tremendous. For 2 or 3 moons the sun had been gathering strength till it seemed to breathe a breath of fire on the earth. All the grass had been scorched brown, and the sands felt like live coals to the feet. Evergreen trees wore a dusty coat of brown. The birds were silenced in the forests, and the world lay panting under the live, vibrating heat. And then came the clap of thunder. It was an angry, metallic, and thirsty clap, unlike the deep and liquid rumbling of the rainy season. A mighty wind arose and filled the air with dust. Palm trees swayed as the wind combed their leaves into flying crests, like strange and fantastic coiffure, which means hairstyle.